crises are frequent. Is it the failure of the supranational bodies to respond to them effectively? And where does the power lie? Is it with the capital or the political?
What is that? Is it with the?
Is it with capital or the political?
Dr. Ibrahim?
Okay. I started more from a broader picture, but let me come down further. And I really appreciate Dr. Musimbi's comment of asking us where exactly do we place ourselves. Now, one thing is that we need to appreciate that we as individuals play within a broader political and economic space. That is not something. One thing that COVID has shown us, maybe to a larger extent than we had appreciated before, is just how what goes on in a village corner in this country called Kenya is affected by what goes on in another place in Kansas and another place in Ontario, and another place in Wuhan, China, that nobody before COVID even knew existed. And now it's become the big talk, because that's where the first cases were detected. But having said that, at a very basic and an individual level, all of us are players within an economy and are players within the political space. Now, how then do we try and see who can we really blame anyone? Can we really point fingers? Of course, COVID and all the crises that have come before it, there was another crisis. There was an economic crisis in 2008 that was fair. I mean, some people considered it even a meltdown. There has been a political crisis between 2008 and now. Starting from Tunisia to to Egypt and all those Occupy movements that have been going on, all trying to fight back on the system. And I think the latest even during in India and now. But secondly, is that whereas these crises are happening, they are driven by a reaction. As individuals, we react to certain things. What Dr. Musimbi is calling us towards is to stop reacting and start being, more what we would call proactive. In other words, to start setting the pace. Let me come back to the things I talked about earlier and then try and apply them to the question a bit more closer. Do we value people? Now, I lead an organization, and when COVID struck, I still remember on the 15th of March, on the 13th of March, it was on a Friday, Mutahi Kagwe, the cabinet minister for health, announced that we have reported the first case. The first questions that came to me is, how shall I make sure that the people within the organization that I lead can continue to engage in what matters most to them? Now, whereas that question was ringing in my mind, I also knew very well that we had set certain targets and goals for the work that needs to be done for the year. And therefore, I cannot divorce myself from the reality that we, as much as we would like people to basically enjoy their life and continuing, even as the crisis happens, there are still results to be achieved in that. Of course, before long, I think 2 days later, the president announced what he announced, and it was clear we are all heading home. What are some of the things that we did that I think brought to me the reality of what kind of things that we can be able to engage in the spaces that we find ourselves? I think, of course, just like any other leader, the first thing was, do people have a place they can work from home? Do they have desks? Do they have, it's assumed they have electricity. Do they have internet? And at my company, what we did basically was to say, anything you have been using in the office that you think will be of value for you to work with from at home, please take it. Now, it's a small gesture, but the main goal is to say that I value you as a human being, because at the end of the day, there is still a contract that you have signed with a company that requires you to perform and to achieve certain results. But the bigger question is, are there times when even well-meaning processes that all we care about are results, that people are valued or devalued by the kind of results they are providing, so that the beingness, if there's a word like that, is not appreciated, is not acknowledged. And I think when you talk about capital and economics, I think that's what we see, that's what we are struggling with, and the politics of it, where we have so much exalted the positions, the wealth, and the accumulation that comes with that, that it has completely clouded us from our own responsibility, that at the end of the day, first, we are human beings. You know, and I think one of the biggest things that this evening session should remind us is that we are human beings. We are not human doings. However much we have tried to define ourselves by the things we do, you know, it's interesting that the two presenters today have a doctor title, but I believe that if something was to happen to me right now and I collapse, it's not my doctor title that will save me. It's a nurse in the neighborhood who knows how to do first aid, who will save me. But the point I'm trying to say is that, friends, God has given us the grace and the opportunity to be able to influence the spaces we are in. And it's by acknowledging that we are human beings with that call, and not necessarily just a focus on the human doings. I feel like I have gone further than your question, but I needed just to explain that anytime we exalt results above people, we start losing it completely. And that is the accusation against the political system and against the economic system, the capitalistic system, that it has made human beings to be simply means of production, voters, and consumers. In fact, that's what they are called in those, you know, even, I mean, it's the same language that is used in the matatus. They say beba pesa. They don't say beba mtu. Translated in English, carry money. You know, they say stop, carry money. But what they are seeing is not money. They are seeing a human being. Thank you.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Abraham. Dr. Musimbi, do you want to add something? Yeah.
Is it capital? I don't know if the question was informed by the word crisis and what crisis is, or how they were informed by that word, because it would appear as if the crises are actually caused by the governance. I think it's important to understand that a crisis is a crisis. Nobody wanted to have a COVID crisis. Nobody wanted to have an economic, whatever it is. And that's why we call it a crisis, because we're going along a certain road, again, as Dr. Abraham said, that we're going towards a certain end. Let's say that for us in Kenya, we are going towards a certain Vision 2020. And then something happens that stops the train from going forward. And that is what we would call a crisis, that we cannot continue to go forward. Now, when we have governance, governance has a responsibility to make decisions. What do we do at this particular point? Now, we in Kenya have decided that we are going to give that responsibility to certain people who are going to go into government to make those decisions, and we are supposed to hold them accountable to those decisions. And so it boils down to, how have we understood this? I was listening to the, I think he's called the Administrative Secretary in the Ministry of Health, and the Chief Secretary Administrator. And he was giving an account of how the country has been able to deal with this particular crisis. And so along the way, they had to make certain decisions. And when you have a crisis, you are in a situation where everything is volatile. Everything is a bit complex. Everything is uncertain. You don't know. And then you have certain decisions and complexities that you have to come through. And so those decisions sometimes have to be risk-taking. For example, when they say stay at home, they are taking that risk, hopefully for the benefit of all Kenyans, because they have seen that it's something that has been done by others, or they have learned, or they've gotten information, hopefully to make such a decision. Now, in our eyes, we may think this is very unfair. This is not right. How can we be made to stay at home? We don't have anything to eat. And so what are we going to do? Are we going to survive this situation? A lot of people in the office block that I work in have had to leave because it is not possible for them to sustain the rent. And yes, was there utu, as what Abraham is talking about in terms of thinking of the people, was it taken into consideration? Perhaps the whole idea of making us stay at home was for us to remain healthy enough to continue to be on the train to go towards 2020 or 2030. But then we still have to ask ourselves, what part have we played in this? And I'm just hoping that if we recognize that a crisis such as this, if not worse or slightly as much, would come along again, that all of us here on this particular call this evening, or this particular conference this evening, are going to sit down together and analyze the kind of crisis that we've been through and see where things could have been better done, so that the next we can present this to those who are in governance as part of our responsibility to be able to see, did they take the right risks? Did they have insufficient? I remember the administrator saying, well, the good news about COVID is that we now have more beds in hospitals, which was something that we were hoping to have universal health coverage. And so that's a result that Dr. Abraham is talking about. But then I don't know whether they have realized the effects of the whole situation on the populace of the entire Kenya. Right? They were hoping to have these beds in place. They were not hoping to have it done under a crisis situation. And so do we have the capital? The capital would be, again, as I said earlier, in the capacity and the competence of the leaders who are taking those responsibilities to take the right risks, to take the right decisions, and to make the right move in order for the country to be at its best, despite what it would have gone through. And so I don't know whether it's a capital in terms of money, whether it's a capital, but indeed, even if you have money, you need the right people to be able to utilize it efficiently and effectively for a good end. And so I don't know if I've addressed the person who asked the question. If they would like a little bit more, I'll be happy to add to that. But I think the capital, the main capital is in the people, and the people that we select to put in those places of responsibility.